Hey everyone, chaomix here. If you're subbed to this channel, you may know that I streamed an entire playthrough of Sonic Unleashed. And if not, why don't you do me a quick favor and hit that subscribe button. It helps me out way more than you think, and you'd be way past cool if you did. I also have the stream VODs in a playlist on my channel, so if you'd like to watch the complete playthrough, feel free to check it out. Poggers! This was actually my first time completing this game all the way through. Now, I did actually play this game all the way back in 2008 when it first came out. Jeez, I can't believe it's been that long. I feel kind of old now. But I ended up dropping it towards the end for a few reasons I'll get into later. To put it short, my patience with the game was pretty short and I got fed up with the game for various reasons. But jumping forward 13 years later to today, I felt that I finally had enough patience to commit myself to finishing this game once and for all. And as it turns out, I was right. It took roughly 16 hours, but I finally ended up finishing it, with the occasional help of chat guiding me through some of the confusing sections. Take this shortcut, you'll skip the whole Werehog section. What is this shortcut? How do I do this? Wall jump? You can wall jump as the Werehog? I definitely think this game's perception has changed a lot over the years. When it first came out, there were a lot of unfair, negative reviews, and I really think the reason was because this was the next mainline game after the disastrous Sonic 06. I can't even begin to describe the lasting impact that 06's failure had on the entire series. It's something we still feel to this very day. But for Unleashed, I feel like many of the complaints towards this game are usually extremely nitpicky, and most likely residual hate from the aftermath of 06. However, I will say that some of the common complaints about this game have some merit, which I'll get into later. But just keep in mind, they usually aren't nearly as bad as most people make them out to be. So now that I've experienced this game from beginning to end, and especially since it's still fresh in my mind, I wanted to give the official chaomix opinion on this game. I've had a few people ask me for my opinions on this game, and it never really felt quite right to critique it, since 1, I never finished the game all the way, and 2, I hadn't played it since it came out. But now that I finally have this game under my belt, I thought I'd make a video explaining my experience playing Sonic Unleashed in 2021. Because oh boy, do I have a lot of thoughts and opinions on this game that I need to get out. Does this game hold up? Do I recommend it? Would I invite it over to my house to hang out? Would I let it sleep in my bed? Will it cure world hunger and depression? Let's find out. Let's start this review off on a strong note. The story in this game is fantastic. Quick warning, there will be major story spoilers from this point on, so if you want to avoid them, you can skip ahead to the other sections. I'll have all the timestamps in the description. From a 2021 perspective, this game's story is an amazing breath of fresh air. It has this great middle ground in terms of the tone of its story, especially when compared to the games that came before and after it. It isn't as edgy as the early 2000s Sonic games, but definitely not as cheesy and kid-friendly as the 2010s games. I feel like the tone is something that most fans of the adventure era and meta era can both enjoy, which is great because it's really difficult to find common ground in tone when it comes to these two types of fans. After all, this game was originally meant to be Sonic Adventure 3, but by the time it started to flesh itself out, it branched into its own unique thing and was renamed Sonic Unleashed in the West and Sonic World Adventure in Japan. The story starts off extremely strong, with probably the most beautiful CGI cutscene in the entire series. We're thrown right into the middle of an action scene, with Super Sonic infiltrating an Eggman battleship. Sonic falls right into Eggman's trap, and his energy is drained along with that of the Chaos Emeralds. During this process, Sonic transforms into what is known as the Werehog, half werewolf and half hedgehog. Yeah, I always thought this name was extremely silly. Kinda takes away from how cool this form actually is in terms of its design. It would have been way cooler if it was called literally anything else, like Midnight Sonic or Altered Beast Sonic. But anyways, Eggman utilizes this energy to fire a giant laser into the earth, shattering it into 7 pieces and prematurely awakening a slumbering, world-erasing beast known as Dark Gaia. This intro cutscene does an amazing job at setting the tone of the story, establishing the basic premise of the plot, and introducing us to our main hero and villain. Sonic then crash lands into Earth with the 7 drained Chaos Emeralds and awakens next to a mysterious new character with amnesia. Coming to the conclusion that the impact from his fall is the cause of the amnesia, Sonic goes on to help him get his memory back, all while restoring the Earth by bringing each emerald to the 7 Gaia temples of the Shattered World. Sonic eventually names the little guy Chip, and they go on a grand adventure around the world, with each location being based on real-world countries. The way this game crams as much of each of the countries' cultures into these little hub worlds is absolutely adorable, and it also gives the game this grand scale of adventure. You literally travel all over the entire world, with each country having its own unique aesthetic, foods, people, and music. Sonic is the ultimate tourist in this game, souvenir buying and all. Sonic Unleashed just feels like a huge, expansive game because of this, and this feeling is completely unmatched in any game to come out after. Chip eventually regains his memory after visiting the 6th Gaia Temple, and it's revealed that he is actually the counterpart to Dark Gaia. Light Gaia. Dark Gaia's role is to reset the planet once every few million years by destroying it, while Light Gaia takes the broken Earth and reforms it, resetting the cycle of life. Eggman's laser splitting the world into pieces caused both Light and Dark Gaia to awaken, and begin the process of resetting the planet untimely, putting the entire world and all of its inhabitants in apocalyptic danger. The only way to stop this? Defeat Dark Gaia himself and return him to his slumber. Sonic and Chip confront Dark Gaia face to face, but not before the Lovecraftian beast absorbs the dark powers of the Werehog, curing Sonic of the curse. With the help of the restored Chaos Emeralds and the combined efforts of Super Sonic and Chip, they're able to defeat Dark Gaia, returning him to sleep inside of the Earth. But this doesn't come without a cost. Restoring Dark Gaia to the Earth results in a very similar fate for its counterpart. In his last moments before returning to the Earth, Chip rescues an unconscious Sonic by bringing him back up to the surface. And as he disappears, he leaves behind his necklace, which Sonic then wears on his wrist in order to remember his good pal and all the adventures they shared together, and then never wear it again in any other game. Bye bye. The ending to this game hits hard. In order to explain why, let's go over all of the characters and how they play off of each other in this game. We have to talk about Sonic and Chip first, obviously. They're paired together from the first moments of the game all the way until the end, and their personalities complement each other really well. Chip is the comedic relief, and also kind of the tutorial or guide to learning how to play the game during the beginning. And he somehow manages to not be extremely annoying like these types of characters usually turn out to be. He doesn't have any annoying repetitive catchphrases, he doesn't have some weird squeaky voice, he doesn't even have some kind of weird quirky gimmick. He's kind of just a silly, believable character that tags along Sonic for the entire game. Speaking of Sonic, he usually plays off of Chips' jokes and nonsense by being a bit of a grump. Unleashed probably has the most mature Sonic we've ever seen. He almost plays this kind of guardian role, because he's constantly protecting Chip and getting his focus back on track after being distracted by things like food or tourism. This somewhat different take on Sonic really only works because Chip is by his side. Imagine if Sonic acted like this on his own, he'd be kind of unlikable. But because Chip's personality is so exaggerated, Sonic feels pretty relatable here because it's probably how most of us would react to such a small cartoon fairy animal thing's nonsense as well. Sonic and Chip share a few tender moments as well, showing how they truly are friends until the end. After Chip regains his memory, he humbly assumes that Sonic's journey with him has come to an end since his debt has been repaid. So facing Gaia at the end would be a solo endeavor. But because Sonic is Sonic, he refuses to let Chip go at it alone and promises that they would see the situation out to the end together. Sonic and Chip endure a lot together throughout the course of this game. And because all of this, it really makes the ending of the game hit that much harder. Now, I haven't mentioned them yet because truthfully they don't play a huge role in this story, which is fine. I think the main focus of this game being with Sonic and Chip really solidifies them as great characters. But there are a few of Sonic's friends that make appearances and have small roles within the story. The first being Sonic's #1 sidekick, Tails, who plays a much less prominent role in this game than most others to come before it. He kind of just acts as another guide to figuring out where to go next, and also a means of traversing traversing around the world. Other than this, he doesn't do too much. But there's actually one scene I want to point out, and that is the first cutscene introducing Tails to this game. Maybe you already know where I'm going with this, but in this scene we find Tails by himself, surrounded by a group of enemies. He cowers in fear and cries out for help. It kind of reminds me of a certain scene from Sonic Forces that everyone loves to bash. So here's my thing. If you're gonna bash Sonic Forces for this interpretation of Tails, you gotta point your finger at Sonic Unleashed as well. If anything, this scene might be even worse, because at least in Sonic Forces, Tails was being attacked by Chaos, a being known for completely leveling an entire city in Sonic Adventure. The enemies Tails gets surrounded by in Unleashed are a bunch of common pushover enemies you find throughout every level of the game. So this is kind of the first game to really throw Tails' character progression from the previous games out the window. The next side character appearing in Unleashed is Amy, and man, she really needs glasses or something because she mistakes the Werehog for regular old Sonic. In Adventure 2, she mistakes Shadow for being Sonic, which is at least somewhat believable, maybe if you just squint your eyes and look away from the screen. But the Werehog is like twice as big, extremely hairy, and probably smells a little bit too.
Uh-oh, stinky.
But anyways, Amy is kind of just Amy in this game. She idolizes Sonic, even as a gross, overgrown rat with mutant powers. Even less so than Tails, she doesn't really do too much. But again, it isn't the worst thing in the world because it gives Sonic and Chip a stronger focus and builds on their relationship throughout the story. The final character I want to talk about is Eggman. Eggman is usually a pretty good character, even in some of the not so great Sonic games. This is one of the first games since the classic era where he's kind of this silly comedic evil genius again. He's not as sinister as he is in say 06, but I will admit that him shattering the earth in the beginning of the game is pretty metal. Also, I love this scene of him eating a sub sandwich, definitely one of the top scenes in the game. Eggman appears occasionally throughout the story of the game, challenging Sonic in his various forms, and pretty much always loses. And at the end, the actual villain of the game, Dark Gaia, gives him the boot and turns on him in true Sonic game fashion. Poor Eggman. Whew. Alright, let's start digging into the next section, the gameplay. Like I mentioned earlier, Sonic Unleashed was initially designed to be Sonic Adventure 3, but I have a feeling that the failure of 06 may have influenced Sonic Team to think of ways to stray away from the adventure style of gameplay and pretty much anything resembling it. My guess is that they altered the gameplay slowly and it eventually became its own thing and what we know today as the boost gameplay. Sonic Unleashed was the first game in the series to introduce us to this boost gameplay style. It's a mix of 3D and 2D sections with a boost meter that fills up, allowing Sonic to rush forward at breakneck speeds, decimating most enemies and obstacles in his way. Its gameplay is extremely reactionary and has a ton of different obstacles that you have to jump, slide, and boost through. While I don't believe Unleashed to have the best boost gameplay in the series, it's a lot stronger than Sonic Colors and Forces in my opinion, with Sonic Generations being the most refined. But it's especially impressive considering it was the first of its kind. Okay, let's talk about the other form of gameplay everyone has been waiting to hear about. The Werehog gameplay. When I started my playthrough of Sonic Unleashed, I had just come off my second playthrough of Devil May Cry 5. For those that haven't played, it's an extremely intricate hack and slash game and probably one of my favorites of the hack and slash genre. The Werehog gameplay definitely takes a ton of influence from this genre, but it's a lot more watered down, obviously. To be fair, I don't expect a Sonic game to have combat options as in-depth as Devil May Cry 5, but the fact that this kind of gameplay is in a Sonic game in the first place is already extremely interesting. And it isn't the entire focus of the game because of course you also have the boost gameplay. Maybe if this was the sole method of gameplay, I'd be a bit more harsh on it, but I can definitely give it a bit of a pass purely for adding in variety. When I originally played this game back in the day, I pretty much just mashed the strong attack button through the entire game. I was able to get through pretty much every area by doing this, but I think this was one of the biggest factors in why I thought the gameplay was so monotonous and kinda just fell off. This time around, I really tried to incorporate a lot of the other different combos you can do. because there's actually quite a lot of unique combinations, especially once you start unlocking them through the level progression system. Once I started doing this, the Werehog levels became much more tolerable. However, I wouldn't say that my disdain for them completely vanished. You see, Sonic Unleashed is probably one of the most frustrating, annoying Sonic games I've ever played, because there's a ton of cheese in this game. Like, a lot of cheese. What I mean by this is that there are many times where the difficulty curve of this game drastically increases out of nowhere, sometimes to the point of being straight up unfair, and it's usually within the Werehog sections of this game. Don't get me wrong, sometimes I was just bad at this game. I would die and would totally recognize that it was no fault other than my own, but I was able to see my mistakes and what to change in the next attempt in order to succeed. But Unleashed has so many moments where you die feeling like it wasn't your fault. Sometimes the game will eat your jump input. Sometimes the Werehog doesn't have a drop shadow underneath him to judge where you're going to land after a jump. Sometimes the game makes you make several extremely tight jumps in a row with barely any room for error. Sometimes the game's camera swings around when you're doing a precise tightrope section, causing you to steer out of control and plummet to your death. Or sometimes the game throws a crazy amount of enemies at you out of nowhere and you just run out of resources and die. A large handful of the Werehog levels also feel like they're kind of just twice as long as they should be. A lot of these levels can take over 30 minutes to complete, and sometimes up to an hour if you're having a really rough time. It isn't necessarily bad, but it also isn't good, especially when compared to the boost levels that take around 4 to 5 minutes. The stark difference between the average completion times for these two gameplay styles really just makes it stick out like a sore thumb. The final icing on the cake to this is that the majority of this game is spent playing as the Werehog. I'd say it's about a 75 to 25 ratio of nighttime to daytime stages. But despite everything I complained about just now, the Werehog gameplay isn't as bad as most people make it out to be. Some people will lead you to believe that this makes the entire game unplayable, and this just isn't the case. It definitely has a lot of flaws, and there is some truth in the common complaints that people bring up. However, I don't think it completely ruins the experience of the game, at least if you have some patience like I did during my second attempt to finish this game. While I'm ranting, I might as well bring up another annoying mechanic. The medal collecting. Medals are scattered throughout the hub worlds and levels of the game. Progression is gated by medal collection, so it's important that you actively try to collect as many as you can while playing through each level and exploring each of the hub worlds. The issue is that the amount of medals required to progress can often be a lot. This usually takes all of the momentum of your progress and puts it to a screeching halt. If you're doing a casual first time playthrough of the game, this can be a problem you run into pretty much at every new zone. Even for me, someone who knew about the medal collecting from the beginning and spent a lot of time grabbing as many as I could, I was constantly being locked out of levels because I still didn't have enough. This makes it so that during your whole playthrough, you always need to be hunting for medals and really take your time to search every nook and cranny of the entire game. If you just rush through the levels, you're going to end up missing a ton of medals, and then you're going to have to go back and replay the levels to collect them. This is probably one of the reasons that the Werehog levels drag on for so long. There's a lot of backtracking when it comes to medal collecting. Backtracking isn't inherently bad, but I often found myself confused on where to go next and what stages became available after collecting medals. This can be very frustrating because the loading times aren't the greatest in the world, so jumping from area to area can take a lot of time. Next, I want to go into some of the technical details and accessibility. First of all, this game is absolutely gorgeous. I really think this is the best looking Sonic game to date, and it's crazy because this game came out in 2008, almost an entire decade before Sonic Forces. Sonic Forces has this really weird oversaturated lighting to it, but it also manages to look kind of washed out. It's kind of hard to explain, but when comparing the two games side by side, I think the environments stand out much more in Unleashed. But unfortunately, these incredible looks come with a consequence. This game kinda runs like dog dookie. Especially on the PS3 version of this game, the lag is super apparent. You see, with Sonic 06, the way the game handled lag was by slowing down the entire game in order to keep a consistent frame rate. Sonic Unleashed handles lag by frame skipping, meaning the frame rate dips down, sometimes into the single digits. I'm not really saying that there's a right answer here, but you kinda gotta pick your poison. Constantly playing in slow motion Matrix mode, or playing the game as a Microsoft PowerPoint presentation. Both options suck, to be honest. Now, here was my situation. When I originally played this game back when it first released, I played it on the Xbox 360. From what I remember, it was a decent experience, and I didn't really recall any super laggy moments, but maybe I wasn't as conscious about frame rates back then. But this most recent playthrough, I ended up playing on the PS3, which is apparently the worst version of the two. This version of the game originally only released on PS3 and Xbox 360. The Xbox 360 version is locked at only 30 frames per second, but its frame rate is a lot more consistent, and it definitely doesn't dip as low as the PS3 version, which is capped at 60 frames a second, but its frame rate is all over and can dunk really low into the single digits. This is like the biggest cardinal sin when it comes to Sonic games. When you're going as fast as Sonic, especially in boost style games where you go at absolute breakneck speeds, you need the game to run buttery smooth so you can have a better time reacting to obstacles. This is a legitimate issue, and although it doesn't affect Xbox players as much, I'm sure a lot of players' only experience with this game was the PS3 version. Which brings me to my next point. This game is kind of difficult to play, but not in terms of like gameplay difficulty, although this statement is still kind of true. Unless you own an Xbox console, the game is hard to even access. For PlayStation, it's only available on PS3. You aren't able to play it on PS4, at least natively. I know that it's technically available on PS Now, but 1, you need to pay a subscription fee to access it, and 2, this version of the game is streamed to your PS4 and isn't actually played natively. In fact, this is probably an even worse way to play the game because it adds input latency and even more chance for a low frame rate if your internet connection isn't so hot. The entire time I was playing, I could never get the thought out of the back of my head that I was playing the inferior version and just wished I was playing the Xbox version instead. This thought only became louder and louder every time I'd experience low frame rates, which was quite often. It really sucks that this game is bogged down by technical hardships like this. You can see in Sonic Generations, they definitely toned down the graphics in favor of a more stable frame rate, which I definitely think was the right move. But what if we lived in a world where we didn't have to trade graphical fidelity for stability? Having this game on PC would have allowed for that, but unfortunately this game was never ported, which should honestly be a crime. I would totally love to play this game at 4K 144 frames a second, but I'd at least like to play this game at a stable 60 frames per second. Technically, the best official way to play this game is on the Xbox Series X. Since it's backwards compatible, Sonic Unleashed is able to be played at an extremely consistent 30 frames per second, even in levels that are notorious for huge frame drops like Jungle Joyride. But again, I don't imagine this being a way to play the game that many people have access to, and that's one of my biggest issues. And because I don't want to end this review on a negative note, I want to talk about another thing that I absolutely love about this game, and that is the music. Sonic Unleashed has an absolutely fantastic soundtrack all the way through, and there's a pretty large variety of genres to fit all the different cultures you visit. The instruments are all ones that you'd find within the actual country they're based on. The daytime stages tend to have high BPM music that just gets you pumped, and the nighttime stages usually have something a little bit more chill and laid back. The only complaint I have with the music is that whenever you get into a battle as the Werehog, it plays the same song no matter what the situation. I think it would have been cool to maybe have a unique battle theme for each of the 7 zones. But don't take this the wrong way, the battle music is still good. It's really jazzy and fits the situation quite well. It's just the fact that it's the only music you hear when you're in combat. It gets kind of repetitive. Overall, the entire soundtrack to this game is phenomenal. It's almost completely orchestrated. And the main theme song of the game, Endless Possibilities, is performed by freaking Bowling for Soup. The final interesting thing I want to point out is that the world map theme is used as a leitmotif throughout the entire game. There's a handful of tracks that have this reoccurring melody sprinkled into the middle of the song. Have a listen to a few. All in all, Sonic Unleashed is a really solid game, despite all of its glaring flaws. It has an amazing story, well-written characters, and innovative gameplay. However, there are many things in this game that might be a huge turnoff for some. I know when I first played this game, I ended up dropping it due to a lot of the frustrations I explained earlier. It definitely isn't a game for everyone. It requires a lot of patience, but if you're willing to stick it out to the end, I truly believe it's worth your time. Hey everyone, thank you so much for making it to the end of this video. If you like what you saw, leave a like and subscribe for more content similar to this. It really helps me out and allows me to keep making videos like this on a weekly basis. In the comments, let me know your opinion about Sonic Unleashed. And finally, if you love discussing all things Sonic, make sure to join the community Discord. I'll have the link to that in the description. And as always, I hope everyone has a fantastic day. Peace.
Wax and spin in the center.